The more I've studied billionaires, including one I just finished an interview with yesterday, it all comes down to mindset. And a lot of people don't focus on that. The last thing I'd say on the mental models topic that's so critical is that
Richard Wilson, welcome to the BetterWealth Show.
thanks for having me here, Caleb.
You've interviewed 39 billionaires, and there's probably so much that we could unpack around what are some of the key topics and mental models and frameworks that you've learned from them. And you better believe I'm going to ask
Right.
that. But
Yeah.
I'm curious about yourself. Like, how do you think? Just like, is there a framework, a mental model that you think as it relates to life? And I'm thinking in a couple categories. I'm thinking of like personal happiness. I'm thinking about
Right.
investing, and I'm thinking about business. Not sure if they all collide or if there's three
Right.
separate buckets that you have. I'm just curious to learn from you in how you
Sure.
think.
Yeah, I think one of them is to try to have the most fun year of your life every year. Because, like, what's the point of having your cake if you can't eat it too? And
Yeah.
the thing is, like, if you're trying to have the most fun year of your life, you're not going to work on business ideas which are lame and linear with bad partners and bad employees and putting up with non-excellence and having team members that are not exceptional. It's not fun. It's frustrating. And so putting up with those couple of clients that just aren't worth it and they're like half your headaches and it's only 2% of your client base. It's not the most fun year of your life if those things are happening. So it's not about being on constant vacation or trying to work 4 hours a week. It's about, in my mind, doing exciting things that move the needle, are exponential, working with great people, great partners, great business models. And if something's not working, you need to tweak it, tweak it, tweak it, and then just get rid of it if it's not going to be fun and exciting. So I think that's like a core kind of theme overall in my life. And that's one of the reasons why I live in Hawaii and why I run an investor club. It keeps my interest. It's exciting, interesting, etc. And happy to share like one or two other models if you want, but that's kind of like a core one that's kind of central to all parts of my life, not just to business.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that. I would love to hear more on the personal side, and then I know that you share that it kind of translates into business and investing because if you want to have the most fun year yet, you're probably going to invest differently in your outlook on investing, and you're going to do business differently. So yeah, I would love to hear other mental models as well.
Yeah, I think that one key part of that is sometimes you're about to invest with someone and something just seems a little bit off, and just having the courage to listen to that is really important. There was a Harvard Business Review article, I'll never forget it, said it was about can you trust your gut? And
Mm,
the main point of the article was, well, it depends what your gut is made out of. And if you've been in business for more than a decade, probably should just trust your gut if you don't know why you don't want to work with someone and not sure about them. So I think that's kind of core to it. But I think another mental model is just this concept of, in the hacker world, if you want to break some algorithm, some password, you might try 10,000 attempts on a password until it works potentially. And sometimes it takes down a server, makes a website go down, and it's called like a brute force attack, sometimes is what they call it. And it's basically trying 10,000 different combinations until something works. And then if you take that concept and you take it with Robert Cialdini's reciprocation influence principle of helping others first, and then they'll probably create good karma, and then some of those people want to help you in return, and you combine those two things, that's a mental model that we've developed and found super useful so many times. And so it's basically how do you go into a niche, position yourself by trying to add value first and create reciprocation in 1,000 different combinations of ways. And then the ones that work, and you keep adding value in that way and go deeper. And by doing that on each interaction, there's a negative cost, hopefully, to the other person. So they're like getting a free book, getting a free AI tool, getting a download of a webinar, etc. And you're trying different topics and formats and demographics, etc. But it's a brute force attempt until you figure out what works, and it's giving first. So you're being aggressively generous, and not just being aggressive in the sales pitch or something.
it's like you're finding ways to give, give, give. You're tracking the thing that gets the most attention or the most demand, and then you double click that and put more of your resources on in that. Is that an example of
Yeah, it's like what's the most value? Like what are people just loving and eating up? And like Kevin McGovern's a member of our investor club, and he says it's all about pattern matching. You see what works in business, you do 10 times more of it. You see what's not
yeah.
working, you try to fix it, and you get rid of it.
So any space that you get into, if you're investing or in business, you're that's the approach that you're taking, is how do you flood the market with good content, and then that's really
Yeah.
helpful because sometimes people say the exact opposite: focus on one thing, don't don't be too spread thin. And so it's that balance of like, yeah, but how do you know if that one thing is the thing you should be focusing on?
Yeah, if it was a crowded market, I would sub niche it down. We enter markets that we don't feel like are very crowded, and then we will take that niche little territory and then we'll just build up walls around it by putting hundreds of resources there. So,
Yeah.
for example, in the billionaires niche, we've created a tool called Billionaire Collective Intelligence. And what we did is took all of our now 45 interviews with billionaires, and then we also looked and found there was 986 videos on YouTube of a billionaire talking publicly. We got all of those videos, transcribed all of them, and put them into an AI tool. So you can present your challenges, your opportunities, things that you're having a hard time with, a team member, how to scale, et cetera, all in there, and then get feedback based on the collective intelligence of 400 billionaires. And that's free for anyone that's like a member of our club, et cetera. And that's something that, like, it's not just thought leadership. It's like tools. It's a resource. So I think that's really important. And like for life insurance, it's very crowded, right? So I would niche it down to life insurance. Is it for investors? Is it for founders? Is it for heads of manufacturing companies?
Yeah.
How can you niche it so that you have few competitors and then you are doing 10 times the helpful number of things in that sub niche versus trying to take on the whole industry, right? Because like nowadays, you want to be an expert in the stock market, you're competing against Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio and
Yeah.
even penny stocks. There's 500 experts on penny stocks these days. So
Yeah.
you have to be like biotech penny stocks, and then you have 7 competitors, and
Love
you
it.
can run circles around them. That's like the layer we try to get to.
Love it. What would be some of your mental models around investing? I get asked obviously a ton of
Yeah,
questions around what should I invest in, what asset classes should I invest in, and I hate answering like straight up that question without trying to get them to think through of like, this is how you should think about investing, and then use this to go fish versus I'm going to be held liable because I told you invest in X, Y, and Z asset class and it didn't go well, and now I'm the reason you
yeah,
lost money.
yeah. You and I have a lot in common because you understand the responsibility that comes with people asking that, and it's like you should not be asking that to a random person that doesn't know you because whatever they say is a sales pitch or random,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, um, and maybe a combination of both. So what I would say is like the mental model of think it through from my perspective is to think about it in 3 major boxes. So this is how a lot of the wealthiest families think that I know at least, which are usually first generation wealth. This is not necessarily true for second, third, fourth generation. And that is one box is defensive, diversified, and it's public market stuff. Diversify into ETFs, stocks, bonds, etc. It's what typical wealth advisor would do for you, right? And it's almost pure defense. It's almost 100% hands off. You might tell your stock advisor, hey, I love Costco and Amazon and I do or don't like Tesla, whatever, and then they do everything else. But it's hands off, diversified. The second bucket is usually cash flowing real estate. Most of my clients, it would be 80% um, cash flowing real estate, maybe 20% real estate development. But it just depends on the client. And it's like, it's hard asset. And usually my clients prefer a little bit lower debt than most people. They're not putting 80% debt on things. They prefer 50, 60, or even 25% debt sometimes. And then the third bucket would be operating businesses and direct investments. And the biggest portion of that for most of my wealthiest clients is investing in things where they have a huge edge and they can play offense there. If they made their money in real estate, then their bucket number 3 is that niche in real estate that they know cold. But to grow their net worth, they're really looking typically at focusing on 1 to 2 industries where they can really scale something out. If they made money in dry cleaners, maybe it's dry cleaners. Or they made their money in manufacturing, maybe it's that. But a lot of my clients will say, you know what, I think the future is stem cells, or we really are passionate about addiction recovery centers, whatever it is. And that could be one of the 2 areas, but they get real focused on there. And by looking at 100 addiction recovery centers, you start to identify good from a bad apple. You learn about distribution, regulations, rules, and then you can be smarter than many other people in that area. So it's a really long answer to your question, but thinking about diversified bucket, real estate bucket, direct investment, operating business investments, and playing offense there in the third bucket to boost the balance sheet is how most of my clients who are entrepreneurs think and work.
What is your thoughts on where emergency funds and like cash equivalents lie? Is that in the diversity bucket, or is that a an emergency fund bucket before you even start to invest?
A lot of my clients don't, they want to have a truly liquid version of cash equivalents. Sometimes, it's not as liquid as you expect in a big crisis. But besides that, a lot of my clients are keeping more cash on hand than they'd like to if they're not happy with the level of deal flow they have. And so it could be anywhere from 2 to 6% as kind of a strategic allocation to cash. But in an economy where they think things are way over the top and they're going to come down soon, they may keep, as much as 10, 12, or if they just had a liquidity event, much more in cash. Sometimes they exit an event, haven't found their next deal yet, and they're 15, 20% cash. But strategically, they're usually keeping it under 10% pure liquid cash. And the thing is that a lot of the families, if they're not just worth 5, 10, 15 million, because we have those in our club too, but if they are worth lots, 50 million, hundreds of millions, then there's always cash flow coming in, something going through an exit soon. So there'll be cash rolling in over time from distributions and exits. So it's more just kind of predicting those cash flows coming and where you're going to replace that capital sometimes.
What and from your perspective, like how many months slash years should people have access to that aren't correlated
I
to
see.
volatility?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good question. I think for like normal people listening, which means like normal business owners that are worth, $250,000 to 2 to 4 million, 5 million, that's most business owners, right? I think for people like that, I'm a big fan of low debt. One of the 120 books that I've read that are authored by billionaires is Warren Buffett's annual shareholder letters for the last 60 years, this big fat yellow book. And almost all the billionaire books are on Audible, but this one's not. And that book, Warren explains his mentality, and it's in line with a couple of the centimillionaires that I know really well. He says that he treats debt almost like an emergency reserve. He'll have 15, 20% debt on his books, sometimes no debt on a company. And then if he needs to get debt, he can get moderate debt or low debt. He almost never ever wants high debt. And he jokes like he's too old to start over, but he's seen people blow up and lose everything, and I have too. And so that's kind of our model. Personally, last time I bought a personal house, we used 25% debt, put down 75% cash. In one of our real estate portfolios where we own 5 assets, we have 22% debt on one asset. The other assets are all free and clear and cash flowing. So I'm conservative. Maybe I'd be wealthier if I wasn't, or maybe I'd be broke and blown out if I wasn't, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, I am very similar of the mindset, not to the level that you're at from an investing standpoint, but from running a business and all, it's like, yeah, you might look at my portfolio and be like, you're a little too conservative, and yet I
Right.
have multiple businesses that I want to keep afloat, and so
Yeah.
yeah, opportunity cost is tough to measure in a vacuum because you're not factoring in risk, and that's
Yeah.
like the toughest thing because risk doesn't necessarily fit into an IRR calculation. And
Right.
it would be amazing. Hence my next question. How do
Yeah.
you measure when you're looking at these buckets from cash flowing real estate to business and all? What is your framework for due diligence? Because as you know, as a lot of billionaires and a lot of big time investors, they care less about getting a better rate of return, and they're obsessed about how do I eliminate downside and
Right.
maybe get the same market return but less downside. Don't want to put words in your mouth. How do you determine? How do you factor in risk? How do you do due diligence? And then how do you decide what type of rate of return you're happy with? I know I asked you like
Yeah.
3 questions that could probably be like full day seminars, but
Yeah.
I'm just again curious because I don't get to
Just
talk
like
to people like you every
straight
day
down.
that live this out.
Yeah, yeah. I'll rattle off like 6 or 7 answers here. So first of all, you have to think through that framework and think, does this deal even make sense for me? Does it fit within one of these 3 buckets and my strategy and my thinking for each? The other thing you have to think is that even if you know the space of gas stations cold or stem cells cold, if you don't know the person and the deal is in Guam or Zimbabwe or Belgium, you may have no interest, right? It doesn't matter if you own 82 dry cleaners in California. If the deal's in Belgium, you might be just like, I don't know Belgium. Is it the regulations bad? I have no idea. And so what I always tell people, if you're raising capital, go to people who either know you, know the industry, or are local to the deal or local to you. If they're
Yeah.
none of those three, you're never going to raise the money. And if you're an investor, don't take meetings with people or you don't know them, you don't know the industry, and you're not local to the opportunity. It's just in general, you end up wasting a lot of time. With due diligence, a lot of people jump on a phone call. Oh yeah, let's get on a call. Let me hear about that. And the person trying to raise money will almost always want you to get on a call. But what I always start out with is, okay, you're in that niche. Well, here's what I know about the space, and here's what I'm already worried about based on your email. So let me ask you 4 or 5 questions over email before I get on the call. See your answers. If the answers are good, maybe I skim through the materials a little bit, and then ask you 5 to 7 more questions. And if you survive that whole process and you fit my 3 bucket model,
Yep.
and it just strikes me as compelling, okay, then maybe we should get on a phone call. And that can save you hundreds of hours of your life because everyone wants to rush to a phone call and you're like, oh, it's a dry cleaner in Zimbabwe? Like, no, I don't know if I shouldn't have got on this phone call. Like, oh, you're a startup and you're losing $1 million a week and you want to burn more investor money or you go out of business next month? Maybe not, you know? And if I'd known that up front, I wouldn't have got on the phone. And so I'm a huge proponent of audio messages, WhatsApp, emails,
Yep.
and there's one more thing related to AI I was going to mention about due diligence, but I'll stop there for a second to see if you want me to clarify anything I just
You
talked
can't make
about.
that hook. You can't say I have this AI hack and then just not say it.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we just developed last month for this AI mastermind that we already put on is we took 150 white papers on private equity due diligence, angel investing due diligence, real estate due diligence, all different types of checklists and due diligence best practice articles and white papers, fed them into an AI tool. And then we've engineered the prompts to give people red flags, top questions to ask, risks that you may have missed. And it is saving a lot of our investors hours and hours of time. We're just giving this away for free for members of the Family Office Club, but also one of the best case studies came up with one of our investors. He said, I have to read these 140-page PPMs. And even if I can read 140 pages without my eyes glazing over and somehow understanding all the legal lingo, if I then also ask AI, what are the top risks? What are the top red flags? What's missing? What
Yeah.
questions should I ask? It's always going to find some things that I should just add to my set of questions. So it doesn't replace your brain, but
Yeah.
using the Dewey due diligence tool plus your brain, you're probably going to ask sharper questions. And that's like a really practical use study for AI right now, I think.
Yeah, love it. And what's exciting is it feels like we're just getting started on
Oh,
AI.
yeah,
And got some more questions around AI.
sure.
Do you feel like we covered mental models when it comes to personal happiness, investing, and business? Is there anything else you wanted to say about business? Because I know that you talked about
Yeah,
having most fun year yet. How I think of, by the way, I think of business as just a more active investing. So I just want to be very clear. Like business and investing are not like two separate. It's just business for me is a more active investing portfolio versus if I do a real estate deal with somebody or invest in the markets, I'm more passive in that deal. But I try to I have a mental framework, and I'm just curious how you make decisions on who you work with and what markets you choose.
sure. Yeah, part of it is, thinking through, like Charles Munger said, everyone has 100 mental models. You should be collecting, improving, and tweaking over time until they're excellent.
Yeah.
And you spend your whole life improving those 100 mental models. So that's one thing I have in mind. But I think what's been powerful is that when thinking through how to grow a business and how to study, one of my goals and what we talk about in the club is being ultra healthy, not just ultra wealthy. And if you're ultra healthy, you may have more energy, can focus better, maybe attract high quality clients with things in common and actually get more done. And I think that's really critical because if you are successful and make tons of money and you're unhealthy and an alcoholic and have been divorced 9 times, then you're basically telling people around you, like, literally kill yourself to get the money. All that matters is money. It doesn't matter if you have a social life as a founder. It doesn't matter if you go on fun, exciting trips with your college buddies. It doesn't matter if you're healthy. All that matters in this family is money. And we will die to make money just to pass it on to other people and spoil their kids so they have no motivation to work, right? It's like, it doesn't make any sense when you say it out loud. And in a room of 140 doctors who paid 30 to 50,000 a year to be part of a investor club, I said, how many of you spent 30,000 on your wealth last year? And one hand went up. So all these people in healthcare were spending more on their wealth than their health. And that was like a big eye-opening moment. So that's something really core. And the last thing I'd say on the mental models topic that's so critical is that the more I've studied billionaires, including one I just finished an interview with yesterday, the more it all comes down to mindset. Because obviously they became a billionaire by acting differently, and that was based on actions they took that were not like others. But why did they take those actions? Obviously their mental models are different than others, and it all comes down to mindset. You don't have the same mindset of everyone else and then take other random actions. It just doesn't work that way. So it all comes back to mindset. And a lot of people don't focus on that. They're like, oh, what's the secret strategy? What did he do to become ultra wealthy? It's like, well, this reality is different than 10, 20 years ago. The mindset is more critical than the action they took.
When it comes to mindset, what do you think separates a billionaire's mindset to a millionaire's mindset? I'll stop there. I was gonna go once, but it's like, what separates someone who's a millionaire or like on the road to becoming a millionaire versus someone who's worth a lot more than a billion
Sure.
to a couple 100 million? I think people would be
Yeah,
fine with
yeah.
that too. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think for almost everyone listening here, if you ever get to 10 million net worth or tens of millions, you've made it, right? It used to be that a million was a lot of money, right? If you're worth millions, 5, 10 million or more, you're probably ridiculously successful compared to most other people, right? So that's one thing is to keep in mind when we talk about these big numbers. It's kind of like, I realize for most people, it's like not their goal. But I think the big difference maker is thinking bigger, thinking more exponential, and not being limited by other people. So many of the billionaires I've talked to have this gut instinct, and reading all of these 115, 120 books authored by billionaires now that I've gotten through, it's really taught me that if somebody in a meeting or on your team or a partner says, oh, well, everybody does it this way, so we should just do that, instantly the hairs go up on the billionaire's skin and says, no, stupid, we're not doing that. Or if somebody says, no, you can't do that, that's not how this industry works. Or no, that's impossible. Oh yeah, that'd be nice, but that's just not allowed because of X, Y, and Z, or that's not possible. Then they lean forward because they know if they follow the herd, they're at best average. And they don't want to be really good at getting average. They need to maybe do some things for table stakes to be in the game, but they need things that are really more efficient, more effective. No one else is catching rockets. And when Elon asked his team if it could be done or not, everyone said no, except for one person. And he pointed at him and said, you're in charge of catching rockets. Let's figure this out. Because he was at least open to doing it. And I've had that happen over and over again with my team. And just last week it happened where I said, hey, let's reach out that person, see if we can hire them. And their knee-jerk response was like, oh, no, it's not possible. They're working for this other company. It's like, that doesn't mean anything. They could come work for us. And like just a very small example, but there's huge examples beyond that too, where like you cannot assume that everyone's got it figured out and everyone's doing it the smart way. The big gorillas are lots of times hired guns at the top. The founders
yep.
retired, and they're not fat and lazy, but they have big momentum. They don't need to innovate as hard. They don't need to watch the brand new trend as much. And the small people are under-resourced. And if you're a founder with some resources and you're very hungry and focused, then you can outmaneuver the gorillas and you can scale more. So sorry for the mini speech, but like that's like
No,
something that
yeah, and I mean, you've read 120 books on billionaires, and you said you interviewed now 45
45. Yeah.
45 billionaires. Was there any like story out of the 45 that you've interviewed that stood out more than others? And if so, like,
Yeah.
what about that?
Yeah, I think that one that stood out is the book by Arnold called Be Useful. I ended up reading it to my kids after I read it one time because it was so good. And both Arnold as well as Giannis, who became the MVP in the NBA a couple of years ago, they both had the same experience that many people have, where not only did someone tell you no, but they literally laughed in your face because they think your goal is so unrealistic. And then through determination and hard work, they got it done. Like when Giannis's first year in the NBA, he could barely speak English, and there's a bunch of journalists saying, well, what's your goal? And he said MVP, kind of in the broken English, even just those 3 letters. And the journalists all laughed. And do you know the names of those journalists? Nobody does.
No.
They're like, what have they done? Only laughed in the face of what was the future MVP. And like that's what a lot of these billionaires say. As I say, people say no, impossible, and Arnold says that he couldn't even speak English clearly enough for someone to understand him, and he turned down roles as a bouncer for a dance club in a movie or a German soldier. He's like, no, I want to be the leading man. And then he
Yeah.
became his paid leading actor because he had a crystal clear vision. And the documentary called Arnold on Netflix, the very first sentence of the whole documentary, which I've watched twice, is that all of my life I've had this ability to clearly see exactly what I wanted to do and just focus on that and work hard until it became reality. And I think he chose that first sentence for a reason. It's also the first chapter of his book. So that one really stands out to me. And I developed a tool for my kids. I summarized the Arnold book, put our family values at the top, and then I summarized a book called Success Principles by Jack Canfield. And then we read that over at the breakfast table. If we're not reading Success Principles together, which we do once a year, then we're looking at that cheat sheet together and kind of, we tell them, like, forget anything they're trying to teach you at school. If you do everything on this one piece of paper, you'll be an amazing success in life. And don't believe anything anyone tells you, including your teachers, and take it as fact if you don't think that sounds right. Because my teachers always told me, why are you rushing through school? And then I graduated early and made more money than them the year after I graduated. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad I didn't listen to them, you know?
Right. Right. Okay. There's two paths that we can take. Do you want to take the how you raise your kids path? Because I get a ton of questions around that. I have a 10-month-year-old baby girl,
Okay.
and so I'm like very curious about that. But I also
Yeah,
love health, and
right.
100% agree with you around the mental model of like what are you investing in your health, and like
Yeah,
it's impossible to be wealthy and intentional if you're not healthy. And so
right.
what do you want? What path do you want to go down first?
Maybe the health path.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
want to, I actually wrote this down here. It's clear to me, just in research, that you are obsessed when it comes to health, and
right.
so morning routines, evening routines, workout. But I'm also curious around diet. So you tell me what you want us to learn about all the
Yeah,
research you've done. The reason I love podcasts is like I'm now getting a life hack because you've spent a lot of money, maybe not as much as like Brian Johnson, but a lot of
sure.
money on your body, on research. And I just want to learn like how you wake up, how you view, you know, making sure that you're showing up as powerfully as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely happy to share that, and definitely happy to go into the kid stuff too. But like the health side of things, basically, when I first wake up, I get my cup of coffee, and then importantly, I've got a one-page laminated piece of paper, and I read what my quarterly, monthly, and annual goals are. And then I have these little mental programming statements about 30 things that if I know that I did those things, if I followed those 30 instructions, I would be in peak state and I would achieve everything I want to achieve if I could just follow this mental programming. So I start reading that before anything else. And then I jump in the shower while the caffeine gets in my blood and I just think about what I just read. Like, what is my intent for the day? How do I want to be for the day? To my kids who will be at the breakfast table in an hour or two, what do I want to get done, etc. Because I'm in Hawaii, the time zones are weird, so I'm usually getting up anywhere between 3:30 and 5:30, but 4:30 is usually when I'm getting up. And I start out most importantly with that one pager, and then I have a theory of getting my brain tired first, and then I get my body tired. Also makes sense because my time zones are like almost Asia time, so East Coast is 5 hours after me, so I need to get up early to be on sync with my team. But the reason I bring that up is that what I find is that my brain is fresh in the morning, and for 3 to 5 hours a day, I can be ridiculously productive. And then if I have a phone call, I go on a walk, try to get my 15,000 steps in a day. And then when my brain is tired and I've gotten 8, 10 hours of work done, then at noon, 1, 2 p.m., if I haven't worked out already with my wife, then I'll go and do a CrossFit class, or I've got like a 35-pound weighted chest, looks like a bulletproof vest type thing. And you can take out these iron bars or put them in to make it anywhere from 10, 12 pounds up to 35. And I'll go on a hike or a jog with that sometimes down the beach. But that's kind of what I do for my normal routine in terms of schedule that tends to work out pretty well for me. But the most important part is starting out with that one pager because the world will
Yeah.
distract you with their ideas and their agendas and what they want you to do, right?
Do you have an example, or do you have a book that you've came up with that one pager, or like how could I slash other people listening or watching this like create our own one pager?
Yeah, I've got like a template because everybody asks me that at my conferences when I tell them that. And so if anyone wants to shoot me an email, just Richard at familyoffices.com, then I'll just shoot them the Word document template for it. And obviously your one-liners might be different than mine, but what you do matters more than how hard you work is something I read, only focus on exponential, exciting projects. Don't take any meeting I don't want to take. These are things that like are powerful commands to like, hey, these are all, it's almost like a prompt engineering a GPT. Like only
Yeah.
give me outputs that say this, don't say this, act like this, don't do that. And then along the sides, I have pictures of like my goal to get like a ranch based here in Hawaii with multiple homes on it. Like right now we have one house with an ADU next to it. And like I have that goal there, but I also have Arnold on there. I've got Goggins on there. I've got Dan Sullivan on there. I've got Steve Schwarzman on there. And I have pictures of who's kind of on my mental advisory board that I see
Yeah.
as well.
Are you a part of Dan Sullivan's group?
I was for 5 years. I did his 10,000, 25,000, and then I paid
Yeah.
50,000 a year for his levels, and then COVID hit. And I decided, while starting to join YPO or him again, I decided, you know what, all of that money and time of travel, I'm just going to make my own events amazing and put all that energy into interviewing more decamillionaires, centimillionaires, billionaires, and we also interview a lot of pro athletes, and we ask them about grit, discipline, health. We interviewed Mike Tyson. We interviewed a billionaire pro athlete recently. And so my mindset after finding all the billionaire stuff comes down to mindset is like, if I can get the ultra healthy grit discipline mindset of pro athletes and then the mindsets from billionaires, family offices, decamillionaires, centimillionaires, and combine that with capital and AI and meeting
Yeah.
in person often, then something
Game
good's going
over.
to happen.
I agree. I agree that there's
Yeah.
a lot of good things happening there. Is there any diet that you subscribe to, or you just like try to eat whole foods, or what how do you eat?
Yeah. One thing I did recently related to how I eat is I don't like pills for whatever reason. I'm like a 4 year old that way. I just like really don't enjoy taking pills. So I do everything organic powders for supplements. And I basically found scientifically proven powders that boost testosterone or lower cortisol. And I put that into my protein shake every day. And then other than that, I'm really just trying to eat high protein. I try to eat about 190 grams of protein a day. I try to eat my body weight in grams of protein, which is a pretty common recommendation. And then I try to avoid processed foods and anything artificial. So the less guar gums and artificial this, that, or the other thing in my body, the better. I find so many people obsessed with this, that, or the other thing. But at the end of the day, if I could just eat foods that were very, like an RX bar has 4 ingredients, and I don't see any additives in there unless there's some secret
Yeah.
one. So anything more processed than an RX bar that I can see the 4 ingredients, then like I should not be eating that.
Hey,
Like,
you just
right.
added a new mental model, by the way. That's a new mental the RX model. I love that.
Yeah, yeah,
Speaking of Dan Sullivan and strategic coach, what's your favorite lesson that you've learned from him? And because talking about mental models, there's like I just love his
oh yeah,
stuff, and
yeah.
yeah,
He's a super genius for business owners. My goal is to be the Dan Sullivan of investor clubs 30 years from now or 20 years from now, whatever. But he's been
it's
doing it
funny
like,
because I actually thought that when you were speaking and what
oh
you're
really?
doing, I
Yeah,
thought like, well, that's exactly what you're building. That's
right.
exactly what you're doing on the family office investing side that he's doing in the business side. So at
Yeah,
least that was the insight that I picked
cool.
up in speaking with you. So I just want
Cool.
for
That's
validation.
awesome. Yeah, no
Yeah.
one's no one's given me that feedback before, so I appreciate that. Like, so basically, for 1 year, all I did before I paid anything to Strategic Coach, I listened to every episode of his podcast. It was like 200 and some at that time, and I read every book he had ever published. And then I made so much progress and money off his ideas. I was like, oh, it's negative cost to join his group now because I already made money off it, right? So then I joined, and after reviewing everything that he had taught, like not everything, but a lot of it, for me, what's most powerful is to really go through his Unique Ability 3.0 workbook. It's a green and purple book, and the process is related to a thinner book of his called the ABC model, I think he calls it. And basically, the whole point is to figure out what are you exceptional at, you get excited by doing it, you're passionate about it, and you're world class at doing it. And then every year, cut out 80% of the stuff and only focus on the 20% that's more dialed into your unique ability. And as opportunities come towards you, don't care about the judgment from other people that like, oh, that's not, is that your core business? Or, oh, are you staying in your lane? Like, well, if it fits your unique ability under Dan Sullivan's definition, who cares what they say? You know your unique ability, and you've confirmed it through his like 15-step process. You're very confident in it. You can tweak it over time, but the more that you say yes to things that hit your unique ability and grow your business in ways and design your time around your unique ability, then probably the better you're going to do, and people will appreciate you more. So I think that's the number one thing I took away from him.
Love it. I love it. All right, let's talk about kids.
Sure.
Kids is one of those things where once you start a family, I think the shifting, you just think different. And I've always said, like, I feel like I've been a pretty mature for my age, and I started BetterWealth when I was 21 years old. And so there's a lot of things that I've learned. And yet the moment my wife got pregnant, I just started like cleaning up all the decisions that I was like procrastinating on. And now that our baby girl Vivian is born, I want to do the very best job I possibly can to raise her, to not be entitled, to be a value creator, to be an amazing, valuable human that loves people, is kind and all. And so what have you learned from Billionaires? But then what are you currently doing as well that's trying to instill in your family values? And I guess tell me how you're thinking about raising your family.
Sure. One thing that I think is important for business owners to hear out there is that I found it helps me to get up early in the morning and work, get my work done. And then by the time that they're home from school, I'm done with my work. I do no business dinners the whole year, tired by then anyways, because I get up early. I never work on the weekends unless it's when they're already asleep, or when they're still sleeping. So I'll work from 4 a.m. until 6 or 6:30 or 7 a.m. But by the time that they wander into the kitchen, and maybe by the time they're ready for pancakes or cereal or something, then I'm wrapping up my laptop, putting it down, and like they don't even know that I just worked for 2.5 hours. And for me, that's worked out really well. And I do have to travel for business sometimes, and I sometimes bring them with me on those trips. But having those guardrails of like no client dinners, pretty much done with work when they're done with school, I don't work on weekends unless they're asleep, has been super helpful, because then when I am working, I can work intensely. And the other thing is that I constantly tell them about what I'm doing. Like, oh, today we negotiated this transaction and we bought this property in Park City. Or like, oh, today we are doing this gross revenue royalty deal, and we're able to invest and have less risk as we get our money off the top line revenue, whether it made profit or not. And I'll explain to them what a family office is, or why we just had to fire somebody. And like one day we hired a nanny babysitter for them, and the nanny was like on her phone like the whole time, and we fired her the same day. And we said, look, you go anywhere in the world and you spend your whole day looking at your mobile phone, and you're supposed to be typing, calling people, whatever, you're going to get fired too. So that's why we let her go. And you guys saw she was sitting on her phone the whole time, so she's out of here, And so just like talking through things, talking about challenges, about money, about examples that tie together your values on health, etc., are really important. Like when we moved to Hawaii, kids these days, they see, even if you limit it, like we limit their screen time Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, no iPads, no TV, no movie night. But on Fridays, after school, and Saturday, Sunday, they can have iPad and movie nights. And that keeps it balanced in our household. But even so, they'll see Mr. Beast giving away a Lamborghini. They'll see this fancy car there. They'll see, ooh, Cybertruck. They always yell out as it drives by, right? And so the thing is, like, you have to explain to them, like, yeah, flashy cars might be something you see influencers have on YouTube, but our family values health and a outside adventure lifestyle. So instead of buying 10 or 20 Lamborghinis, we got a house in Hawaii, because we'd rather enjoy life than have a fancy life and like show off how much, it's like, what's the point, right? And so those are some of the things that we try to do to kind of keep things balanced.
I love it. Man. What have I not asked? I mean, we got to wrap this up. So I have like one more question. You obviously are doing 13 events, I believe, in person. You have familyoffices.com. You own billionaire.com. Like I think before we hit record, you're probably worse than I am when it comes to buying domains. What are you most excited about this year, and how can people that are watching this or listening to this get involved in your world? And like where do we begin if we want to get plugged into what you're up to?
Sure. A few different places. One is at familyoffices.com. We have a free book. We interviewed Tony Robbins. He talked about how he made $400 million off of one transaction, and we give away access to those types of materials for free. At billionaires.com, we have the 45 interviews that we've done. And if you go to billionaires.com/books, you'll see the top 10 billionaire books I think everybody should read that are just pure gold. So I would recommend buying those for yourself. All of them but Warren Buffett's is on Audible. So I'd definitely check that out. And I think the thing I'm most excited about is digging into how to work. We have 5 different AI tools we're building out for founders and investors that are all free. It's part of the club. But like figuring out those vertical case use studies for being more decisive, conducting more thorough due diligence, instantly building rapport with a potential partner or investor, analyzing your pitch deck and scoring it and getting feedback on exactly how to not have a 2 out of 100 score on your pitch, etc. And combining the mental models from Billionaires with the AI stuff, I think is going to be like rocket fuel for what we do as an investor club. And for those of you out there that are looking to scale something faster, I would just encourage you to focus more and focus on something where no matter how long it takes, and even if no one appreciates your work along the way, the end goal is going to be so worth it if you make it to the top of that hill and you're a top 3 in that sandbox you've chosen to compete in, and to use that brute force reciprocation strategy just to try 1,000 combinations of adding value in a small niche, and then you'll figure it out over time, and things will grow.
Yeah. Do you play poker?
I did in just college, a little $5 to $20
Okay.
buy-ins for fun with friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I
Do
just
you?
didn't know some of the language you've used with stakes and
Oh.
I was just curious if you've what you've learned from poker and business, but it doesn't sound like you're an active poker player. Which, if you go to bed early, a lot of times poker is played at night, and so
If
it's
I
probably
had the
not
right
the
friends here
number
in
one thing
Hawaii.
that happens in Hawaii.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, in college, we liked playing with friends, and then for a couple months, I had played on online poker tables and would play 12 tables at once, and I'd only
That's
play
my
top.
point. I can spot out a poker player when I see one.
So I guess I played more than a little bit, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
only
It's
play
not
the
just
top 10 games.
yeah. Anyone that's playing 12 tables at a time online might know a thing or two. AI again. We're coming up to time. AI is super interesting. Is there any asset class that you'd be like, hey, not giving investment advice, but I would definitely read more on? Is there any asset class right now that you would just say to pay attention?
I like to go where other people are not going, and that means structuring deals with gross revenue royalties because almost nobody does. So whatever the asset class is that you're trying to play offense in, consider using a structure like that. If anyone wants examples or help with that, they can just reach out to me. I'm happy to give them some feedback. And then I would look at, if anyone's offering something and it feels like you've heard it hundreds of times before, try to find another person doing it with a very niche laser focus. And so we just avoid the common, the average, the herd, like crazy. So looking into things like, investing in cemeteries or investing into something that literally lean forward and say, never heard of anyone doing that. That's kind of bizarre. That's kind of weird. Or I don't, but if it's something that already produces cash and is profitable, it's very good that you have never heard it before if you're well connected.
Yeah, love it. The question I end my show on is the legacy question, and it goes like this.
Sure.
If this is the last day on earth that you have, and you're with the people that you love the most, which is your family, and you can't give them any of the 120 books that you've read they can't see any interviews that you've ever done, but you have one conversation with them, what are you going to highlight in that conversation and why?
I think just figuring out what you're world class at, that you enjoy doing, that the world values, and then just focus on a high end niche and then work your butt off. Arnold says that he worked twice as hard as everyone else. He worked 2.5 hours in the morning, then had a different workout partner in the afternoon, and worked another 2.5 hours a day and bodybuild and become the world champion. And nobody wants to do that, but he had more fun every minute of it. He enjoyed it more than everyone else. So he worked twice as hard and had more fun. And when you do that, you just destroy your former self or anyone else around you that wants to compete with that. And Einstein, when he got the Nobel Prize, people said, "Oh, aren't you proud of inventing relativity?" He said, "Oh, I didn't invent it. I just did nothing but study it for a decade, so I solved it." And everyone else is distracted by, oh, crypto, oh, NFTs, oh, AI, oh, this. But like, you gotta focus over decades, and no one will be able to match that.
Richard, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be on
Sure.
the show, and very much looking forward to the feedback. If you're watching this on YouTube, and I would love to hear your biggest takeaway. We covered a lot. We covered a lot of ground in this time with our time together. Love to share your biggest takeaway. We'll have some of your domains down below, and
Cool.
also your email for those people that want to reach out and get some of the
Awesome.
resources that you promised.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Kim.